we have the honor to have Professor Miroslaw Skibniewski to give us a history of ISARC. He was the very first ISARC that started back in 1984. So Mirek, please.
Thank you. Good morning again, everyone. I'm just given 10 minutes to give a quick overview of International Symposia on Automation, Robotics, and Construction. Again, I'm Miroslaw Skibniewski from the University of Maryland. I've been at Maryland for the last 18 years. Prior to that, I served as a professor and also associate provost later on, Dean of International Programs at Purdue University for about 20 years. And when I was a graduate student at Carnegie Mellon in 1984, the first ISARC took place in 1984. And then the second ISARC also on the campus of Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, 1985. And I remember the first ISARC in 1984 gathered approximately 35 people. And that was the worldwide community of researchers and practitioners in construction robotics, which was a very new thing at the time. The first Robotics Institute was established at Carnegie Mellon in early 1980s, and that was one of the very first events publicizing research and development in robotics in general at the time. And construction was singled out by the Department of Civil Engineering at the time at Carnegie Mellon as the growth area of research and development for civil engineering. The department head at the time was Dwight Sangre, and Dwight Sangre, together with Professor Red Whitaker, who is an iconic figure now in robotics in general, but construction robotics in particular, were the first conveners of that conference. So I was on the organizing committee helping out with the preparations to hold the first ISARC. Fast forward next couple of years, the third ISARC took place in Marseille, France. It was organized by the French Institute of Artificial Intelligence that was very active in that field at that time and still is, as I understand. The fourth ISARC was held in Israel at the Technion, Israel Institute of Technology, and the fifth one in 1988 was in Tokyo, Japan. It was organized by Japan Robotic Association, and it was the highlight of research and development of several major construction companies from Japan. I remember at that time Shimizu, Kajima, Takenaka, Taisei, Obayashi, and a few others were the ones that co-organized and spearheaded the development of construction robotics at the time. And if I remember correctly, that was by far the largest participation in any ISARCs at the time. We had over 500 participants at the time, out of which roughly 3/4 were senior engineers and technical researchers from various research institutes from Japanese construction companies. And the rest were researchers in academic institutions and government research institutes. So if I look back at who were actually the pioneers of construction robotics, this is a very broad subject. The first idea of construction robots, as far as I can remember, I wasn't alive at the time, of course, but it was 1905. There was a world exhibition in Paris, in France, and there was a postcard that was produced as a souvenir from that world exhibition. And it was by a French artist, if I remember correctly, his name, François Villemart, produced this postcard, and it was essentially an overhead gantry manipulator with the overhead gantry crane with the manipulator. It was really a gripper, two-finger gripper suspended from that gantry crane, and it was picking up masonry blocks. And there was a control panel that was manned by a person called an architect at the time. The term construction engineer I gather didn't exist in 1905. So that was the first mention that I'm aware of. And later on, construction robotics were researched by engineers and scientists in the former Soviet Union in early 1970s to early 1980s. And none of that work was publicized in the West. I understand that some of it, at least, was done in secret. There was confidential work performed by the former Soviet Army research units, but also at academic institutions such as Moscow Civil Engineering Institute, which is now Moscow University of Research University of Civil Engineering. The former Soviet Union and now Russia actually has very highly specialized academic institutions that focus on one area at a time. So I have publications that were written in Russia at that time, never translated to any other language as far as I know, that are in Russian, but I have, for anyone interested, I have copies of those books and technical reports in my office at the University of Maryland. So fast forward a few years, of course, in early 1980s, the work on construction robotics was again re-pioneered in Japan. Late Professor Yukio Hasegawa from Waseda University was one of the pioneers in Japan, maybe the best known person in construction robotics in Japan. And he published a monumental book, a monograph book in Japanese, to my knowledge, not translated into any other language, that summarized the Japanese developments of construction robotics of the early 1980s up through the perhaps the late 1980s. And then, of course, the previously mentioned Professor William Whitaker at Carnegie Mellon, who pioneered the work in the United States on behalf of the Department of Energy, 3 Mile Island nuclear power plant that underwent a nuclear accident in late 1970s, was really the first test bed of construction robotics applications, mostly for inspection and slight demolition purposes that were implemented at the time. And then, of course, ISARCs were held every year from then on, since 1984. And now the IARC website contains all the repositories of all the papers that were presented at every IARC ever since. So now it's a collection of well over 5,000 different technical articles. When I teach my construction automation and robotics class at the University of Maryland, I make the students to go through every year's proceedings and at least provide a rough statistics of what kinds of applications of robotics were worked upon during all those years ever since ISARC symposia were being held. So here we are, the 40th ISARC, and it's a wonderful research community right now, spanning around the world. And in fact, we have a tradition. IARC as an organization was started in 1993 at the 10th ISARC that was held in Houston, Texas. And the tradition is that the symposia move across actually four continents. We had so we have a tradition of holding ISARC in 1 year in Asia. So this is the example. This year, 40th ISARC is being held here in India. Next year's ISARC will be held in Europe. Then it'll move on to North America. And then the fourth location is so-called a trump card, no pun intended. And it could be a continent or a location other than Asia, Europe, or North America. So last year it was held in Bogota, Colombia, in South America. And there was a year when it was held in Australia, in Sydney. So hopefully there will be future ISARCs in Australia, Samad. And who knows where else? We've never had one in Africa, but there may be one coming in the future. And maybe way, way into the future could be Arctic or Antarctica, who knows? In fact, there are examples of construction robotics applications in Arctica and Antarctica as well. And of course, extraterrestrial applications are a big thing. NASA has a competition for lunar habitat. And of course, that can only be accomplished with robotics and 3D printing. So we have an exciting future ahead of us. And I hope that many of you will be coming back to future ISARCs. One last word is about the journal that I've been affiliated with for the last 30 years. Automation in Construction is the official journal of the International Association of Automation and Robotics in Construction. And we publish papers that are extended and updated versions of papers presented at various ISARCs. So we are all encouraged to take your paper, and if you think that it merits publication in the referee journals such as Automation and Construction, please expand and update your paper and submit it for review and consideration by the journal. So thank you very much again. And next is Professor Borja. He's going to present the statistics of this ISARC and also present the awards for all the efforts, the hackathon and the best paper award. So all this exciting information is forthcoming right now. Thank you very much.